The gavel cracked 3 times, each blow slamming through the federal courtroom like the last nail in the coffin of the empire Meredith Ashford Vance had spent 15 years polishing to a fake shine. Judge Harlan Prescott stared straight at the woman in the spotless light blue suit and delivered the verdict with the calm of someone who'd seen every flavor of greed. Mrs. Ashford Vance, based on the evidence, this court finds the Silver Ridge Estates HOA guilty on 127 counts of fraud, trespass, and water theft spanning 15 years. 400 people sucked in air at once. I watched Meredith's manicured fingers dig into the defendant's table until her knuckles matched her pearls. Her platinum blonde bob, usually glued in place like a helmet of superiority, started to fray. For one delicious second I thought the queen of the HOA might actually keel over in her own courtroom of lies. Judge Prescott kept swinging the hammer. The entire subdivision was built on land illegally taken from the Harlan family through forged surveys and backdated easements. All titles tracing back to the 1991 deed are void. Gasps turned into sobs. Meredith swayed. 3 weeks earlier that same woman had marched onto my porch waving orange violation tickets like they were execution orders. Her voice had dripped with honeyed venom. "You have 72 hours to pay the $100,000 fine or vacate, Mr. Harlan. This is my neighborhood. You're just a squatter on premium real estate." I hadn't said a word. I just gave her the smile my old colleagues at the Federal Land Rights Division used to call the coffin smile. The one that meant someone was about to lose everything they thought they owned. Meredith had no clue who she was poking with her little clipboard. She had no clue I'd spent 16 years dismantling empires bigger and meaner than her beige-painted kingdom. She had no clue that by dragging my daughter into her power trip she turned a quiet inheritance dispute into total annihilation. But to see how 127 millionaire families ended up owing me rent, we have to roll back 3 weeks to the day I first rolled my truck through the wrought iron gates of Silver Ridge Estates and discovered exactly what my grandfather had really left me. The suburban streets were so perfect they looked photoshopped. Manicured lawns edged with military precision, every mailbox the exact same shade of approved beige. American flags hanging at the exact same angle because God forbid one tilted a degree and ruined Meredith's aesthetic. My 15-year-old daughter Sophie sat shotgun with her headphones half on, pretending to scroll TikTok while sneaking glances at the houses that screamed, "We paid extra for the HOA lifestyle." "Dad," she said suddenly, "the GPS says the address is at the end of this cul-de-sac but the road literally stops at a fence with a private lake access. Residents only sign." I killed the engine. Through the windshield a weathered wooden sign peeked from behind ivy. "Harlan family property. No trespassing." The letters were faded but still defiant, like my grandfather himself. 18 months since we lost her mom. 18 months of moving, grieving, and trying to convince a teenager the world wasn't always this cruel. For the first time since the funeral I felt my lungs actually fill with air. The house appeared after the last curve, 2 stories of honest cedar and stone, nothing like the McMansions around it. Silverpine Lake sparkled behind it, so still it mirrored the Rockies like a postcard someone had painted just for us. Sophie's breath caught. Mom would have loved this view. The words hit like a fist. But for once they didn't knock me down. Maybe we'd finally found the place the world couldn't touch us. While Sophie explored the interior, squealing over the stone fireplace and the loft that overlooked the water, I opened the lockbox the estate lawyer had overnight. Inside, a 1934 survey map showing the original Harlan boundaries. 847 acres including the entire lake. A 1952 federal water rights certificate declaring Silverpine a protected waterway. And a handwritten letter in my grandfather's shaky scrawl. "When you read this, someone will have tried to steal what's ours. Use what your father taught you." I waited 60 years for someone who'd fight back. The roar of tiny electric motors shattered the quiet. 3 white HOA golf carts rolled up the private path that definitely wasn't on my map. The lead cart carried a woman who moved like she owned the oxygen itself. Light blue suit flawless, pearls gleaming, blonde hair pulled so tight it looked painful. Meredith Ashford Vance, president of Silver Ridge Estates HOA, stepped out with the confidence of a dictator who'd never lost an election. "Mr. Harlan, I presume." Her smile was all teeth and zero warmth. "I'm Meredith Ashford Vance. We need to discuss your situation. Two men flanked her, one with a clipboard thick enough to stop a bullet, the other holding a surveyor's transit like a prop. I kept my voice flat. 16 years of depositions had taught me the value of letting predators talk themselves into traps. Meredith swept an arm toward the lake like she was unveiling her personal infinity pool. This lake has been the crown jewel of our community for 23 years. Residents pay premium dues for exclusive access. Your little house sits on what we consider shared waterfront. I let the silence stretch until it got uncomfortable. She filled it, of course. I have a comprehensive list of violations. Clipboard guy shoved papers at me. Unauthorized structure on HOA adjacent land. Failure to register with community management. Blocking established recreational easement. Inadequate landscaping. Improper mailbox color. Seriously, that beige is 2 shades off. Easement. I interrupted, not even glancing at the papers. An easement requires a recorded agreement in county filing. Got the registration number. For the first split second something flickered behind her perfectly lined eyes. Uncertainty wearing arrogance like cheap perfume. Our legal team has it on file. Great. When you find it, send me a copy. Until then, you're standing on private property. Time to leave. Meredith stepped closer. Her perfume smelled like money and threats. Mr. Harlan, you clearly don't understand how things work in a proper community. Silver Ridge has resources. Connections. This neighborhood was built by the best families in Colorado. You're just one widower in a dated house. Think very carefully about your next move. I met her stare and smiled the coffin smile. I've thought very carefully. That's why I'm here. She held my gaze for 7 long seconds. Then she spun on her heel, pearls swinging. You'll be hearing from our attorneys, Mr. Harlan. And you will regret this conversation. The golf carts whirred away down the path that wasn't supposed to exist. I went inside and started making calls. 72 hours later, I woke to 9 orange violation tickets plastered across my front door like cheap wallpaper. Unauthorized structure. $10,000. Unpermitted dock. $5,000. Failure to submit architectural plans. $15,000. Blocking community water access. $20,000. Inadequate exterior maintenance. $3,000. Improper waste disposal. $2,000. Unauthorized vehicle storage. $1,000. Failure to maintain approved landscaping. $4,000. Noise violation. $2,000. Total. $62,000 now because they tacked on late fees overnight. I photographed everyone while Sophie stood in the doorway in pajamas, hair a bird's nest, studying the papers with her mom's analytical squint. Dad, those golf cart tracks came from the north path, through our yard. Their whole subdivision only has one entrance from the south. They've been using our land as a shortcut to the lake for years. She traced the survey map I'd pinned to the wall. If they lose this path, they have to drive 45 minutes around the mountain. That's why they're panicking. 16 years old, still grieving, uprooted again. And she just handed me the leverage point. I almost laughed, dark, bitter, but real. That afternoon I walked the perimeter. What I found made my blood hum with the old investigator itch. 3 illegal trails carved through my property. 2 boat launches built on my shoreline with permanent docks. A pump house 50 yards from the water piping straight to the subdivision. Electrical lines, water mains, gravel paths, everything built like the land had always belonged to them. I took 240 GPS-tagged photos. Then I drove to the county recorder's office. A black SUV followed me the whole way. The clerk, a woman named Rosa, lowered her voice when I gave her the address. Honey, you're not the first person to ask about Silver Pine Lake. 3 families in the last 7 years sold to Mrs. Ashford Vance's husband for pennies on the dollar after they started digging. 2 hours later I sat in the back room surrounded by boxes. The smoking gun was in the 1991 file. A survey map showing the HOA boundary beginning at the shoreline. The original 1952 map, the one matching my grandfather's, showed the line 300 meters back. Someone had redrawn everything. Someone had forged my grandfather's signature. The notary who witnessed it had lost his license in 1989 for fraud. 300 meters times the lake's circumference equaled 173 acres of stolen waterfront. At Colorado prices, $12 million in theft. But the real gold was the water. Silver Ridge Utilities, owned by a Delaware shell company tracing straight to Meredith's husband, had been selling lake water to 127 families at $500 a month for 23 years. $17 million. I photographed everything twice, paid cash for certified copies, and smiled at the black SUV still waiting across the street. Day 5 brought the law firm letter demanding $67,000 or they'd foreclose. Sophie read it over my shoulder. They're moving too fast. People who know they're right take their time. People who know they're wrong panic. She looked up with her mother's eyes. So what are we waiting for? That night I made 3 calls. My old colleague at the Water Rights Division. An independent surveyor with 0 Colorado ties. And an FBI agent who owed me for the Redstone case. Day 7 started with Sophie screaming at 5:15 a.m. I sprinted outside. Grandpa's old dock, the one he'd built with his own hands, had been chainsawed at the waterline. Pieces floated like broken bones. A laminated sign flapped on the remaining post. Unauthorized structure removed per HOA Regulation 12.7. Called 911. Then I called the deputy who'd slipped me his card earlier. Deputy Reyes arrived fast, took photos, pulled me aside. Look, every complaint against the Ashford Vance family vanishes in this county. But you're the first guy who didn't fold. When it gets worse, use my personal number. It got worse that same afternoon. A black SUV pulled up and 2 CPS agents stepped out. Anonymous tip about the minor living here. Standard welfare check. They were weaponizing my daughter. 16 years of keeping my face neutral almost cracked. But I heard my late wife's voice. The second you lose control, they win. I invited them in, documented everything, and smiled while they found nothing wrong. Sophie's room was spotless. The kitchen stocked. The house safe. When they left, Sophie looked at me across the kitchen table. This is personal now. I nodded. It was personal the minute they mentioned you. The next 7 days blurred into evidence warfare. My old team pulled every filing. The independent surveyor confirmed the boundary fraud. The FBI opened a formal RICO investigation. A retired surveyor who'd been silenced in 2009 showed up on my porch with a USB drive full of original measurements. I've waited 13 years for someone who could break their machine, he said. Meanwhile, the fines climbed to $100,000. Meredith was all in. So was I. I called the HOA's lawyer directly. I'll pay the fine, but I want a public meeting with every resident. Let's settle this in front of the whole community. Agreed one. He agreed to 8 p.m. At the community center. The community center was standing room only by 7:45. 400 people crammed inside, buzzing with the delicious rumor that the new guy was finally surrendering. Meredith sat on the raised platform in a fresh light blue suit, pearls gleaming, smile sharp enough to cut glass. Her husband and their lawyer flanked her like bodyguards. I walked down the aisle at 7:55 with Sophie beside me carrying my father's old briefcase. Whispers followed us like smoke. Meredith's voice rang out through the mic, sweet as antifreeze. Mr. Harlan, how gracious of you to see reason at last. Do you have the payment? I stopped at the front, clicked open the briefcase, and started handing out 500 copies of the same page. Actually, I have something better. Sophie plugged her laptop into the projector. 2 survey maps appeared side by side on the giant screen behind Meredith. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, voice carrying without a mic because 16 years of courtrooms had taught me how. What I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about this neighborhood. I pointed. This 1952 map shows the real boundary, 300 meters back from the shoreline. This 1991 map, the one your deeds are based on, was forged. Someone stole 173 acres of lakefront from my family. The notary who witnessed the signature had already lost his license for fraud. The room erupted. Meredith shot to her feet. This is preposterous. Our legal team. I cut her off without raising my voice. Your legal team is the registered agent for the shell company selling you water from a lake they never owned. Next slide. Bank records, corporate filings, payment trails. 127 families paying $500 a month for 23 years. $17 million diverted to your husband's companies, while you told everyone it was for community maintenance. Meredith's husband turned the color of old milk. I kept going. You sent CPS after my daughter. You chainsawed my grandfather's dock. You built an empire on theft and called it protecting property values. I stepped closer. I spent 16 years at the Federal Land Rights Division. I have never lost a case. Silence. Absolute beautiful silence. Then I dropped the final bomb. Your lawyer isn't here to represent you. He's a co-conspirator. Every head swiveled. The lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a live grenade. Meredith screamed, all pretense gone. Security. Remove this man. No one moved. 400 neighbors stared at the woman who'd been robbing and bullying them for decades. The double doors banged open. Deputy Reyes walked in first. Behind him, 5 FBI agents in windbreakers. Special Agent Torres read the charges: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Handcuffs clicked. Meredith struggled, pearls swinging wildly, face twisted into something ugly and small. You've destroyed this community, she spat as they led her past me. No, I answered calmly. I just freed it. The applause started slow, one pair of hands near the back, then exploded into a roar that shook the windows. Sophie slipped her hand into mine. For the first time in 18 months, her smile reached her eyes. 6 months later, the federal courthouse delivered the final blow. All titles voided. 127 families learned their dream homes sat on stolen land. But the judge also recognized they were innocent victims. The settlement let them stay on corrected leases. Rent 1/10 of what they'd been paying in HOA fees and water bills. My family trust now owned the land. The lake was cleaned, the pump houses removed, the shoreline restored. Meredith got 18 years. Her husband 22. Their lawyer 12 and disbarred. 7 county officials resigned. The machine that had crushed people for decades was scrap. 1 year later, I stood on the new dock built exactly where my grandfather's had been. Silver Pine Lake sparkled clean and open to everyone. The gates were gone. The private roads public. Across the water, families still lived in their homes, now paying fair rent instead of fraudulent dues. Sophie finished her junior year with straight A's and early acceptance to environmental law programs. She looked at me one evening, envelope in hand from the Nevada Attorney General. Another shell company. Another town. Bigger fight. I smiled the coffin smile again. Nevada's going to be interesting. She grinned, her mother's grin. So what are we waiting for? Power isn't about controlling others. It's about having the strength to protect what matters. Meredith had money, connections, and a kingdom built on fear. I had a house, a daughter, and the truth. Sometimes that's enough. If this story gave you that sweet rush of justice, drop a comment. Was the man who broke all their precious rules the villain? Or was the real crime the HOA Karen who stole millions while hiding behind community standards? Let me know who you think was really wrong. And subscribe because Nevada is next and you won't want to miss it.